How are you, ladies and gentlemen? Coming back at you with another upload for the day, and that's because we had a lot of hot takes for this week. So if your take wasn't included this go around, feel free to leave it again in the comments. Just hard for me to get to all of them. Also, guys, I don't do this very often, but with the newer viewers that we've had coming to the channel, my analytics are telling me that only 57% of you are actually subscribed to the channel. So if you like the content, you've been watching for a while, maybe you didn't even realize you weren't subscribed, consider subscribing if you're interested. That way you don't miss a video. Also, guys, in case you are curious from last week's hot takes question, in which we have one take that Zach Lavine is already an all-time great for the Bulls franchise, which I completely disagree with, but you listen to my thoughts on why I thought that in last week's video. I won't go into it here, but the poll produced some surprising results, to me anyway. 45% of you in some 2,600 votes felt that yes, Lavine is already an all-time great for the Bulls, which I can get why some might think that, but the Bulls do have a lot of all-time greats. On top of that, Lavine still needs to make the playoffs for the Bulls before we can even think about putting him as an all-time leader for this franchise. But anyway, you can check out last week's video if you missed it, if you want to get my in-depth thoughts on it. Also, guys, I've got a lot of people blasting me in the comments on these hot takes headlines that I've had really since starting the channel, and not really realizing that this is a hot take from one of my viewers. This is not my take, but rather my reaction to it. I think people are quick to jump in without having even watched the video, coming in with charged comments and not even realize that I actually agree with them. So that's why this is a hot takes video, but please watch it before coming in with aggressive comments or hitting the dislike button until you know what the video is about. Can't tell you how many times that's happened on my hot takes video. So just wanted to throw that out there as I haven't addressed it in any of my videos yet. But anyway, with all that being said, let's get into the hot take. So this one comes to us from the Lavine. If we get the third or fourth pick, we should try and trade it for De'Aaron Fox with Coby and Lauri. So I assume by you specifying the third or fourth pick that you're saying, you know, this would happen if we were to get the number 1 or number 2 pick, that we should keep it rather than trade it. And for the number 3 and number 4, that should be traded. Now, I do agree on that point. And I actually made a video about how if the Bulls do in fact get lucky and land in the top 4, that they should trade it if it falls anywhere that isn't the number 1 pick. Because if you can get a chance at Cade Cunningham, you don't pass that up, especially when he fits the need as a playmaking, defensive, and versatile point guard. Now, as far as trading the number 3 or number 4 pick and Coby and Lauri for De'Aaron Fox, well, I personally think that's a bit too much. I really like Fox, and I think that he would be a perfect fit, a perfect third star, if you will, to put next to Lavine and Vucevic. But a number 3 or 4 pick is actually going to be pretty valuable in and of itself. Now, it wouldn't be enough for someone like De'Aaron Fox, not even close, but adding Lauri and Coby White, that is a lot of value that the Bulls are giving up in return for one player like De'Aaron Fox. The other thing is, it becomes tricky when Lauri Markkanen, because you're talking about a guy who's going to be a restricted free agent. He technically wouldn't be able to sign, whether it's with the Bulls for a sign and trade or with another team, until August 2nd. And the NBA draft will happen shortly before that. So the Bulls would actually have to make a selection before even including someone like Lauri Markkanen in a sign and trade. But either way, I mean, I like this trade. The only thing I'm pretty sure would not work is that the salaries wouldn't match up, since Fox starting next season will be on a max contract starting at $28 million. But if the money did work, yeah, it's a lot to give up, with the fact that, the Bulls are more or less in win now mode after the Vucevic trade. So, not sure if the Kings would be into this, but it is the Kings, probably the worst franchise in the NBA history in terms of their decisions that they have made for the better part of 2 decades. So, yes, it's a lot to give up, but I think if push comes to shove, I would probably be willing to move forward with something like that. Next, we've got Tariq Durrani. Bulls are going to be a top 5 team in the Eastern Conference. So I assume this means for next season, but in general, you would hope that the Bulls would be a top 5 team in the East, someday in the future. But for next season, a lot of it depends on what the Bulls do this offseason, how things stack up with the rest of these East teams, because barring any major injury or a blow up to a given team, the current top 3 East teams in the Sixers, Nets, and Bucks, they're not going to fall below out of the top 3, not with the star-studded talent that they have on their respective teams right now. Now, if one of the teams' bombs in the playoffs, which currently all are playing really great, but the second round is another story. And yes, it's possible they could look to blow up their team and trade for some other big names, but I think that's really unlikely at this point. So really, you're talking about the Bulls finishing number 4 and number 5 to support this take of being top 5. I like the optimism, of course, but with the Hawks, they're likely going to be getting better, or at least remain in the top 5 as they currently finish this season. The Knicks, a good team this year, but they did maybe overperform a little bit given the overall talent level that they have. The other thing is they have a lot of cap space, so it depends on what they bring in for the offseason and who they actually let go, because that can have a huge impact on their team for better or for worse. Then you obviously have two teams like the Heat and the Celtics who greatly underperformed this season but have a lot of talent, and they could get right back into the top of the East mix with some of the fixes that they have to their team. It was just announced that the Celtics have let Danny Ainge go, and Brad Stevens, their coach, will become the president of basketball operations, which kind of an odd move to me, but maybe I'll save that for another time. So anyway, I think, to say the Bulls finished top 5 in the East, having a big leap like that from finishing 11th this season is a bit of a stretch. I do think that they will finish top 8, but again, me saying that is very premature because we haven't seen what kind of moves will be made this offseason, and of course, we haven't seen whether the Bulls will actually get the NBA lottery and get the top 4 pick, because that'll have an impact on their overall success next season. Next, we've got Reggie Banks. If the Bulls fail to make the playoffs and find themselves 7 or 8 and losing convincingly in round 1, Donovan will be let go. Well, a lot of it depends on the circumstances that they find themselves in, right? In the situations you mentioned, like if the Bulls missed the playoffs, but it's because their best players were injured for a good portion of the season, or there were other factors at play, which let's just hope that that doesn't happen, then really the front office is probably going to give Donovan a pass. Now, if the team is fully healthy for the most part, and the front office adds pieces to improve the roster even further, and the guys have a full offseason and a training camp to get ready for the season, unlike last year, and the Bulls still look like a mess with no chemistry, no heart, no effort, poor defense, yeah, you better believe Donovan is going to be on the hot seat and will likely be fired if the Bulls miss the playoffs. Now, if they make the playoffs as the 7 or 8 seed and still lose convincingly, like you said, which I assume means in a sweep or in a 5-game series, it's a little bit different because getting to the playoffs would be an accomplishment just purely for the fact that the Bulls haven't been able to get there for the last 4 years. I get where you're going with it in the sense that it still looks bad because realistically, when you have 2 All-Stars and hopefully some better pieces that will be added, and you still barely make the playoffs and you lose badly when you're there, yeah, I definitely think he would be on the hot seat, but I don't think that he'll likely get the can just like that. They'll probably give him one more season to see how he does. Next, we've got RHM54. Bulls sign and trade Lauri to the Cavs in exchange for Darius Garland. This one is intriguing because I've never really thought about the potential of Darius Garland being included in any trade scenarios for the Bulls. So, the Cavs have too many guards, specifically point guards, and really, their better point guard is Colin Sexton, who at least at this time, it appears that they'll likely start building around him as their point guard for the future, although even that remains to be seen given that there were some trade rumors around Sexton at the trade deadline. Now, why the Cavs chose to draft Garland with the number 5 overall pick when they already had Sexton is beyond me, but that's the Cavs for you. Garland, was in the same draft class as Coby White, so still very young, only going into his 3rd season. He's 21 years old, and guys, Garland actually had himself a really good year this year, playing a combo guard position between the 1 and the 2, averaging 17.4 points per game, 6.1 assists, and 1.2 steals. And, he shot very efficiently, going 45% from the field and 39% from 3. All of his numbers are significantly up from his rookie season. Now, do the Bulls really need another combo guard that is more offensively minded? No, but it is better than losing Markkanen for nothing. And, absolutely, especially with Garland as young as he is and the potential that he has. He was a number 5 draft pick. All that being said, I don't see the Cavs doing this, even though they could likely use a guy like Markkanen, given that they're going to need a stretch big man, especially since Kevin Love will likely be moved since he doesn't really fit their timeline and hasn't really for the last couple of seasons. But I think the Cavs know if they want to trade Darius Garland that they can get a lot more for him in return than a sign and trade for Lauri Markkanen. But I like the take though. I hadn't really considered that one before. Next, we've got Thomas the Baller. The Bulls will have a better record than the Warriors next season. It's funny because I have so many thoughts on this Warriors team, and it's part of the reason why I mentioned I'll likely start doing some general NBA content this offseason, since there's only so much Bulls content that you can create without just cycling through topics. Who knows, I'll have to maybe create a general NBA channel at some point in the future, but we'll save that for another day. But anyway, as for this take, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked by this because I personally think that this Warriors team is done. You know, I know Klay Thompson is coming back next season. He's obviously not going to be the same player after missing 2 straight seasons and now being 31 years old. You know, Steph Curry obviously had himself an amazing season, but he also put up really big numbers on a mediocre team. And on top of that, he's going to be 34. Draymond is a shell of himself, and he's also in his 30s. Andrew Wiggins, you know, a decent player, but nothing that is really going to move the needle for you. And on top of that, they have absolutely no cap space to work with, given the massive contracts that the big 3 are on, and Wiggins on top of that, actually. So, you know, they can't really improve their roster unless they look to trade James Wiseman, which is a possibility. But even then, I don't really see them making any kind of run. You know, I don't see them being contenders, and I also wouldn't be shocked if you saw another injury to the big 3. Not saying that I would want to see that. I would never wish an injury upon a player, but I just wouldn't be surprised if it did happen, because those 3 guys have a lot of mileage on them at this point. After having gone to 5 straight NBA finals together, that's a lot of games and minutes in a 5-year span. And you've been seeing it now take a toll on those players, with Steph getting injured last season, Klay the past 2 seasons, and Draymond being in and out of the lineup. And, you know, at the same time, you obviously hope the Bulls are going to get better from this past season. They're also in a weaker conference. So, yeah, I could see the Bulls having a better record than the Warriors next year. Not saying it's a lock to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did. Let's do one more, and this one comes to us from Red Firewolf 23. If we get CP3, 2022 NBA champions for the first time since 1998. No, you know, first of all, we're not getting Chris Paul. I obviously would love it if we could, but he's not declining his player option from the Suns, not when he's set to make that much money. You know, the only way that the Bulls could convince him to come is if they sign him to a longer term, more lucrative deal that is worth more and is going to attract him more than exercising his $44.3 million player option, which, if that ended up being the case, I probably wouldn't want the Bulls to do that, since CP3, as great as he is and would be the perfect point guard for the Bulls and what they need, he's 36 and will likely start declining soon. The last thing you want to do is lock him up in a long-term contract and hamstring your salary cap when he's 37, 38, or even 39, depending on how long the contract is. So the Bulls aren't just going to, you know, get him, first of all, right? And second, even if the Bulls did add CP3 to the roster, I do think that they would be well positioned to make a good run in the playoffs, and you could even consider them to be contenders. But winning a championship just like that next season, with most of the guys on the roster having 0 to minimal playoff experience, let alone finals experience, which even CP3 himself doesn't have, yeah, it's not happening. No, you don't just instantly become title favorites like that overnight because you add Chris Paul. And that's not a knock on Chris Paul, because he's an incredible point guard. It's just, a title doesn't come that easily by adding one guy on a team that finished the prior season 11th in the East. Anyway, guys, I'm going to leave it there for now. Feel free to add in your takes in the comments below to be included in next week's video. And as always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.